In ancient Egypt, there was this place, whispered about, with this incredible mix of reverence and, well, a little bit of mystery. Its name alone is just so evocative, the House of Life. I mean, that name hints at something way, way bigger than just a normal building, right? So what was it? What was actually going on inside?
All right, so let's really get into it. What was this mysterious Egyptian House of Life? For centuries, this place was one of Egypt's best-kept secrets. It was a hub of incredible power, a concentration of knowledge like nowhere else. So today, we're going to try and peel back the layers, one by one, and see if we can figure out what its true purpose really was.
So first up, was it just a divine library? Well, on the surface, yeah, that's a good place to start. At its most basic, the House of Life was absolutely a center for knowledge. You can kind of picture it as the ultimate ancient Egyptian library, but, and this is a big but, one with a very divine mission. Its ancient name was Per-Ankh, which, you guessed it, literally means House of Life. And this place, this was the stomping ground for the absolute intellectual elite of Egypt, the scribes. Now, when you hear scribe, you might just think of record keepers, but oh no, these guys were so much more than that. They were the guardians of their entire civilization's memory. We have examples like a man named Amonwasu who proudly called himself a scribe of the House of Life. These were the people responsible for copying, studying, and protecting the most critical texts of their era. But you have to understand, what they were protecting was so much bigger than just history.
And check this out. This quote from Egyptologist Jan Osman really nails the sheer scale of their mission. He calls it the center of cultural endeavor to preserve and ensure the ongoing process of cosmic, political, and social life. I mean, let that sink in. The ongoing process of cosmic life. We're not just talking about storing some dusty old scrolls here. We're talking about actively maintaining the very fabric of the universe.
So, okay, if their job was that huge, that brings us to the next logical question. What kind of stuff were they keeping in there? What was on the shelves of this sacred library?
Well, the collection was staggering. I mean, it had everything. You had your sacred religious texts, like the famous Book of the Dead. But right alongside them, you had advanced medical and even surgical texts. You had wisdom literature, basically philosophical guides to life. You had incredibly detailed astronomical charts. And then you had magical formulas. That's the key. This wasn't just a library of information, it was a library of power. It held the keys to navigating both the physical world and the unseen metaphysical world.
So maybe library isn't even the right word. A much better way to think about it is as a kind of magico-religious university. This was a place of higher learning where the lines we draw today between science, religion, and magic just didn't exist. They were all completely blurred together. Because for them, knowledge wasn't just about passively understanding the world, it was about actively influencing it. And that idea of influencing the world brings us to its most secret and maybe most important function. The House of Life wasn't just for studying, it was a workshop for magic.
Right, because this was no ordinary university. The knowledge here was meant to be practical. It was meant to be used. And very often, that meant it was magical. The priests and scribes working in the Per-Ankh weren't just sitting around reading these texts for fun. No, they were using them. The magical formulas were treated almost like recipes, and the spells were seen as very real, very powerful tools.
I mean, get a load of this. This is a direct quote from a magical papyrus. If you wish to bring in a drowned noun, you put C-Con-V-N-B stone on the brazier. Now, that is not a theoretical text. That is a straight-up instruction, a step-by-step guide for achieving a very specific and frankly pretty startling outcome. It shows you right there how they saw knowledge as an act of force, a way to directly meddle with the unseen world. And these rituals weren't just some vague hocus-pocus. They were incredibly methodical. Just look at this procedure for divination. It's so precise. Step 1, go to a clean, dark cell. Step 2, fill a white lamp with pure oasis oil. Step 3, recite specific spells to the sun god Ra at dawn. Then you place pure frankincense on a brazier. And finally, you have a young boy look into the lamp to see the shadow of a god. See, the whole goal was to create the absolute perfect conditions to talk to the divine. This was applied science, applied magic. Okay, but we're not done. The deepest, most mind-blowing secret of the House of Life goes even further than that. It turns out it wasn't just a place where cosmic knowledge was stored and used. In a very real sense, it was the cosmos in miniature. So that really forces us to ask a much bigger question.
After everything we've just learned, was the House of Life just a physical place on Earth, just a building made of mud, brick, and stone? Or was it something more?
Well, there's this one incredible text, known as Papyrus Salt 825, that gives us the final, jaw-dropping piece of the puzzle. It flat out tells us the secret. The House of Life was not just a building. It was a theological model of the entire universe.
Think about this for a second. According to this text, the very architecture was made of gods. The floor wasn't like the earth god Geb. It was Geb. The ceiling wasn't like the sky goddess Nut. It was Nut. The four corners of the building were held up by four of the most powerful deities, Isis, Nephthys, Horus, and Thoth. And deep inside, hidden within this cosmic structure, was the great god of the underworld, Osiris. The building itself was a living, breathing symbol of the entire universe.
So let's try and put all these pieces together. When you look at the whole picture, it's pretty clear that the House of Life was one of the most complex and honestly most profound institutions anywhere in the ancient world. Because it wasn't just one thing, right? It was all of these things at the exact same time. It was a scriptorium, where scribes copied text. It was a library to store that knowledge. It was a university, where people studied it. It was a workshop for magic, where they put that knowledge into practice. And somehow, wrapped up in all of that, it was a living blueprint of the cosmos.
So, in essence, the Pharaoh Ankh was like the intellectual and spiritual engine of the entire Egyptian civilization. It was the place that kept all the knowledge, the words, the rituals, the magic that they believed was absolutely necessary to maintain Ma'at, which is cosmic order or balance. It was how they ensured that life itself, not just their own, but all life, would continue forever.
And that leaves us with a final, kind of mind-bending thought to chew on. For the ancient Egyptians, knowledge wasn't just a way to describe the universe. They believed it was a fundamental part of its structure. So think about that. What does it mean when a library, a place of learning, isn't just a container for information about the world, but is seen as a model of the world? It really makes you wonder, what does that say about the true power of knowledge?